Hello, and welcome to the Pragmatic Product Chat Series, where we tackle the biggest challenges facing today's product management, product marketing, and other market and data-driven professionals with some of the best minds in the industry. I'm Rebecca Kalogeris for Pragmatic Institute and your host for this episode. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most powerful tools for any product manager or product marketer. It's like a decoder ring that lets you really understand what buyers are looking for, what features they really care about, what language they use. It's like a Rosetta Stone for the market. As our research shows, though, way too few of you are actually using it, like less than a third. So what is this magic tool that's going to unlock everything? Simple. It's win-loss. And so that's what we're going to dig in today is win-loss. And helping us to do that is none other than Zach Golden. He is a director at Anova Consulting Group. He is a fellow New Englander and one of just a handful of people I know that are as passionate about win-loss as I am. So welcome, Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. Excited to be with you again.
Yes, I'm excited to have you here. And you're a fellow New Englander, so it's fall here. So it's like the one time a year we can brag about our weather, but we won't do that. We won't talk about it, but it is really nice out. So I'd like to start with sort of origin stories. Like, how did you get where you are today, Zach? And why are you so passionate about win-loss?
Sure. So I've basically spent my whole career with a win-loss consultancy, Anova Consulting Group. And origin story is I knew I wanted to be in some form of like market research and consulting early on in my career. Like found myself at Anova, but why I've stayed for the last over a decade is learning about win-loss and how powerful it is has made me really passionate about the type of research. And what I think is maybe the most interesting thing about win-loss is what we're doing is on the surface relatively simple. I think, we're trying to answer some of the most fundamental business questions. Mm-hmm. Things like, how can I grow my company? How do I beat my competitors? What do customers think about my product? Those are simple questions, but the answers to those questions are incredibly nuanced. And for someone who really loves to just dive in, learn about a company and the competitive dynamics of the industry that they're in and how they can move forward to try and win that industry. It's just constant learning. It's kind of a mix of all these different skills and things that you get exposed to. So that's why I've really wanted to focus my career around it.
Oh, it makes total sense to me. Like curiosity is one of those things. Like I love learning about businesses and markets and putting together the puzzle. And that's really what win-loss does. And in your case, because you work at like a firm, you get to do it for a variety of different companies, right? You're learning all these things. But I think what's really interesting is even within a single company, win-loss can sort of uncover so many layers and so many perspectives that it's just such a powerful tool. And I know you have some great examples of clients, right? Like you don't just have to take our word for this, right? Like it's not just, we have research, we have others, but like, let's hear some stories where this has had just a huge impact on some of the clients you've worked with.
Yeah, totally. Excited to jump in there. I thought maybe in preparing for this, what I would do is talk about some of the trends that I'm seeing with the clients that I'm working on. And just from a background perspective for your listeners, my role at Anova is really, partnering with the various clients that we work with and running research programs on their behalf to collect customer feedback. And then based on all the data that we've collected, I get to interpret and deliver those insights to them. And they can use those insights to then better partner with their customers and grow their business. And, in terms of like some of the trends that I'm seeing, why I'm in a position to be able to talk about those is the information that I get access to. So it's all that primary research, the proprietary data. We conduct thousands of interviews a year that really unpack essentially why customers work with a certain company or not. And so being able to see like the answers to that question for companies of all shapes and sizes and industries is really
That's interesting. Like cut across the clients and what you're seeing as trends. Yeah,
exactly. And then it's not just the hard data. I take that data, I interface with marketing leaders, sales leaders, market researchers at our client's business and get to hear like their perspectives on why those trends are existing, some additional context that they are noticing. And so some of the most interesting conversations that I've had recently are kind of lay them out there, and we can go as deep as you want. But one is that market leadership appears to be really becoming more influential in why organizations, companies are winning or losing more. And then the second is there's always a big emphasis around telling your story or articulating your value proposition. And something that I've noticed is that the difference between really high performing sales and marketing teams that I'm working with and maybe the underperforming teams are the approach that they're taking to tell their story, to articulate their value. The highest performers are doing something that to me sounded a little counterintuitive at first, and that they're not really focusing on their own solution. They're actually much more centered on the customer's problem. And so they're using that as like the foundation for telling their story. So I can go deeper into those too.
Yeah, let's dive both. And the market leadership one, when you first said it, it sounds a little bit like the rich keep getting richer, right? Like we wanted to pick someone who's really safe. So if they're a market leader, then I'm just going to keep going there. Is that what you're saying? Is there more nuance here? What do I do if I'm not the market leader currently?
Yeah. So that's the beauty of it, is that there is a lot of nuance. And so maybe first, let's just defining when we talk about market leadership, I'm using that as the category that I apply to feedback related to a company's brand and reputation, or the expertise or experience they have in certain verticals, maybe placement in third-party analyst reports or online reviews, all of that stuff that, when a customer is looking at the spectrum of vendors that could potentially solve their problem, how do they rank them? That is what we're talking about, market leadership. And in terms of like it becoming more influential, the data is actually really surprising. So there were 3 client reports that I did recently, and in one of them, the frequency in which that client was winning because of market leadership, it doubled compared to last year.
Oh, wow.
And the second one, it tripled compared to last year. And then the third one, market leadership was 5x as a reason for them winning compared to last year. And there is some variability to like what's actually, I think, driving the reason for market leadership increasing in those 3 specific examples. But even like zooming out, like for all of our clients year over year, like market leadership is the one attribute that we're seeing jumping the most as like a reason for customers making their decision. And I think that what's driving that is so much now of the buying journey is happening almost like pre conversations with us.
Absolutely. Yep.
So there are some stats out there that say close to like 70% of a buying journey is done before even sales gets in the room. And that's not just, that doesn't really diminish like the importance of sales. It actually makes it even more important because they're like playing catch up. But there's so much information being shared and gathered by buyers that I think there's more emphasis being placed on what are they hearing when they are seeing when they look online, when they talk to their peers who have done evaluations of vendors. What have they heard when they've consulted with industry experts? And I think that there's a lot of resources being paid to curating that that kind of message or persona online now from the companies that are really leveraging their market leadership to put them in a position of strength. So whether that's running kind of like campaigns to increase the quality and quantity of online reviews, like on like a G2 or even like a Reddit, there's a lot of resources being paid there. Partnering with like those expert third-party reviewers like a Gartner or Forrester, those companies, navigating those relationships to be able to show up well in their reports is something that I think our clients who are really winning a lot more because of their market leadership, they're devoting some resources to. And then the third thing is storytelling as it relates to their own innovation story. I think a lot of companies say, oh, it's on the roadmap, or everyone's favorite buzzword in the last 18 months has been AI, right?
Right.
And
don't worry, AI will handle it. Oh, okay.
yeah. And so everyone's talking about those things, and buyers, I would say, especially in the last like 9 or 12 months, have begun to be a little more critical in terms of like, what does that really mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think companies that are, again, leveraging their position as a market leader to really stand out have carefully curated stories that aren't just, we're investing a lot in a new technology or we're bringing this to market. It's really tied in to be customer centric. We heard you ask for this, and so our upcoming feature will help you do that. Or, as part of our mission to accomplish A, B, and C, we're planning to do X, Y, and Z. And so they're really doing a lot more from like that storytelling perspective to make sure that their innovation story resonates more with buyers.
That's super interesting because I do think like when AI not first came out, I know it's been out for a long time. Like, I don't mean that, but when we just really, when we got that crest recently, you just threw out that we were going to do AI stuff, right? And it was much more about the technology and the how something was going to happen than it was the what it was and how it was going to help them. And I think as it's become more ubiquitous and people have like, we're excited about it, but it's less than, you can't just say we're doing AI. It has to be, to your point, tied into a story of that's great. And that means what to me? Like, what is it going to be for me? Much more than what technology we're going to use. And it's hard when we are also in a little bit of a tech arms race, right? With our competitors to feel like that, but it's easy to lose that story in just wanting to make sure you have all the latest technology buzzwords.
Yeah, totally. So I think like to your original question of like, what are the learnings? What can I do working for a company? Maybe no matter where I am in like that market hierarchy, maybe I'm a market leader, maybe I'm up and coming and trying to disrupt the leaders. Maybe I think I'm a leader, but the customers don't think so.
Right.
I'm trying to
That's
get
the
up there.
worst.
Wherever you stand, I think there are those important learnings. I mean, like focusing on the storytelling aspect is probably the best or a place to start. Make sure that what you're doing is very customer centric. Maybe bridging those points together to like the point about the online reviews, especially from customers. Having customers tell your story for you is really impactful. And so investing in that is important. And having experts in the space kind of tell your story for you too. It's those analyst firms, but also I've seen something too for some of our clients is they're taking a very industry-centric approach to how they're crafting their sales motions. So whether that's dividing their sales team by vertical, or another one is they have more of like a regionally and account size focused sales team, but then they have a group of industry experts that get pulled in from the sales team to when they're sitting down with an automotive client, they have someone from the automotive industry that can talk about, these are the problems that we're seeing organizations in your space experience. This is how our solution is being deployed to help with that. Or maybe that's different for a CPG clients, but the framework is the same. That's actually the client that is seeing like market leadership jump 5x is they've been very deliberate about trying to bring in industry expertise and really show their buyers that we understand you and we are the best position to help solve your problems because of our understanding of your problem.
I think that's super interesting too. You said a lot of things there that I think are important. You talk a lot about, and we all say this, right? How much of the buying process comes before they come to us. And yet so much of our product marketing, our marketing, our sales efforts are making sure that our stuff is good, right? Our website, our channels, our social, our SEO, but all of those things, not SEO that helps people find you, but still a lot of those things are like, how are we improving the way we talk to someone who already found us? What you're saying is not only do you have to think about that, but you have to be really aware of all the ways they're finding out about you indirectly, right?
Mm-hmm.
That if you want to not only have the credibility, but the visibility, then you need to make sure that you're appearing in these other conversations and not just waiting for them to come to your house to talk to you, right? And that's not just like, oh, I'll use some SEO tricks to get them to my house. It's understanding they're having deep conversations that you wish you could be part of, but you're not going to be yet, with these other places and in these other places. And how do you get reflected there?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's just really important to know that market leadership is becoming more influential in why decisions are being made, why companies are winning and losing. And so branding, focusing on establishing your company as that market leader, whatever avenue you need to take to get there, it's really critical for maintaining that competitive advantage. And it really should be prioritized because, yeah, ultimately it's about telling your company story. And if you do it well, the market's going to reward you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And like you said, these two are very connected, right? The market leadership and the storytelling, I think are really great. And it's interesting because if I'm the company, one of those companies where market leadership is 2 times, 3 times, or 5 times more important than it was, there are a lot of decisions as an organization then that would be affected by that, right? Where am I prioritizing? Where am I investing time and resources? What, like, the it's not just an interesting fact that that's more important, but it changes my strategy.
Yeah, exactly. You've got it. And it is connected to that second point that I brought up too around like um, the highest performing marketing teams, sales teams, really what they're focusing on. It's that storytelling piece. And what I've noticed is that I mentioned they're taking a little bit of a counterintuitive approach to telling their story. It's much more problem centric as
Yes.
opposed to like
We
solution.
love that. That's the way it should be.
There you go. Yeah. So I'll give you, the most recent example that I was working on with this company of mine. They have a software solution focused on like supplier management, so managing all the contracts that a company may work with in terms of their vendors and things like that. And it would be easy for them, and their maybe traditional messaging was, hey, we offer this platform that helps you manage all of your suppliers all in one place. But where they've shifted to and seen a big growth in terms of the effectiveness of some of their marketing materials and just how their value is being perceived in the marketplace, it's helping them win more, is now they're going in and they're talking about the problem, right? They're saying, hey, remember when you spent 20 hours last month working on compliance reporting for all these vendors that you work with? How much of a pain that was?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we help with. And I think that, being problem centric, being problem focused really helps people like remember what their pain was, remember why they were even evaluating vendors in the first place. I think, especially in the last year or so, there's a lot of data that Anova is seeing, and some of the other research firms out there are also supporting. Like decisions are not happening as frequently or as often as they used to.
Yeah.
Right, there are a lot of stalls and a lot of no decisions. I'm sure any kind of revenue focused team out there is feeling that pain of just getting people to try to ultimately make a decision. And I think there are a lot of reasons for why that's happening, but which I can get into if you want. But at the end of the day, it's you always have to like coach your buyer how to buy. And one of the things is getting to what's actually going to cause them to act. And usually one of the best ways to get someone to act is like have them experience pain.
Right. Yeah.
And so when you focus on the problem with your storytelling, with your messaging, with your sales articulation, it keeps people really focused on, okay, we need to solve this problem.
So I have to say, I can actually like hear listeners driving around yelling, yes, Zach, tell us why it's happening. Why are there so many no decisions and such slower processes? So I'm going to ask you that. Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I mean, even just like the magnitude of the problem, because I think everyone is like yelling at their windshield right now. And they're probably looking for the validation.
Yes, right? I'm not alone. Please help me explain this to others as well. Yes.
Exactly. So, I mean, like anecdotally, Anova does a lot of win-loss, and now almost like people call it like win-loss, no decision, because there are just so many situations where, this isn't a competitive loss, but the buyer told us to come back next month, or, this is put on hold until next quarter. There's also like hard data out there. There's a software purchase platform called Vendor that basically calculates how much software is being bought by companies. And for all of their like 25 top categories of product, purchase volume is actually down 23% year over year. So there's only
wow.
3/4 of the amount of decisions that are happening. And then Forrester has data that says 90% of decisions from B2B buyers are the process is lengthening or stalling. So we've got 3/4 of the situations, and then of those situations, 90% of them are stalling. So it's a huge epidemic right now in like B2B sales and buying. And I think for a couple of reasons, like one, everyone's aware like the free money environment is over. People are in more of a choice making environment now where they're not throwing money at everything because of higher interest rates. And then I think what's maybe overlooked is the capacity that decision makers, the confidence that they actually feel to make decisions. So because of the great resignation, so many people change jobs. And now maybe those decision makers are in newer roles and don't maybe have the authority yet to feel like they want to stick their neck out there and say, this is what we're doing. This is the direction we want to go with. And so what do? They look to de-risk their decision making. And what do? You de-risk it by making it a consensus decision. All of a sudden, decision-making committees have, by Anova data, doubled in the last 2 years. We've seen examples of like sometimes people bring in like 15 to 20 people to make it.
That's like every salesperson's worst nightmare.
That is too many cooks in the kitchen.
That's too many.
And so you've got like these macro environment things. You've got like the nuances of just what happens within an organization once the players change and the politics change. And then you just think about like a straw man of a buying process is the buyer does their online research. They talk to some vendors. They maybe whittle it down to some finalists. And then ultimately they're left with selling those finalists like internally to their boss, their manager. But maybe those internal champions are also new with their role. Maybe they're not really equipped to build the business case internally. And everyone's got their ROI calculators out there. Everyone's got our solution will help you do X, Y, and Z. But the reality is for that champion who maybe did a couple of evaluations, but that's one of 20 other things they're doing in a day, the features of the functionalities aren't resonating with them. When they sit down to build the business case or say, hey, this is the vendor I want to move ahead with, it's hard for them to really articulate why or what's different about that vendor. And so I think the companies that are, overcoming that indecision, overcoming that like analysis paralysis on behalf of the buyer, they're getting them to slow down and just think about what are the things that you're focused on, you being the buyer. What are the things causing you pain? We can help with those.
Well, you can see that in that situations you talked about too, like there is hesitance to put out there. There is always, everyone knows you only are going to spend on what's urgent because every one of the people who are buying from you also have buyers doing the same thing to them, right? So it's like a trickle everywhere effect. But the urgency comes because you have a problem where the pain is so great that there is risk in not moving, which is why, to your point, that ties back into storytelling based on pain is what's going to help purchases move through this sort of quagmire where everyone's slowing down because the risk is higher to not move. Exactly. And that is a story I think that our listeners need to be able to tell, right? Not just why you should pick me, but why you have to pick something, right? You need to make a movement here because if you don't, the risk is greater than picking the wrong one.
You got it. Yeah. And the maybe like tangible takeaway for your listeners is to like how to focus on the pain, how to focus on the problem. It comes down to understanding your buyer. And I saw this data from this like sales training organization that blew my mind. It was, every buying process, there's some sort of needs assessment, right? Like, what are you looking to achieve? Only 70% of those needs assessments, they'll really get to like what the impact on the business is. Like, what does it mean for your company if you don't achieve this? But only 10% get to the personal impact. What does it mean for you personally as the buyer, to,
We forget it's
buy
still
this
people
information?
buying in a company, right? Yeah.
Bingo, right?
Yep.
So, going back to like the client example I had a couple minutes ago of that supplier management software, it's what does it mean for the buyer personally? It's those number of hours that they worked on the reporting, or maybe it's the career risk for them if they were to fall out of compliance and they were responsible for that. Um, Focusing, getting to that deeper level of understanding your buyer at a personal level is probably one of the biggest takeaways, because then you can craft your messaging, you can tell your story in a way that's going to connect to your buyer.
Well, and I think that's important too, because we talk about these trends, and these trends are big trends, and they matter to everyone listening, right? Market leadership's going to matter, and storytelling is going to matter. But what story resonates with your particular audience is still a question, right? So that's where win-loss trends are really interesting. But having a win-loss program of your own starts to not only validate those trends against your specific business, but really give you precise, really like precise guidance on, okay, stories matter. What are the stories? What are the pain points that we need to focus on overall? And I think that's one of the strengths of the win-loss, is like bringing it into your specific context.
Exactly. That's probably like the biggest shift overall that we're seeing, like the most successful companies take, is being truly customer centric. Everyone says we're focused on our customers, we're here to make our customers happy, but what does that really mean? You have to really understand what they're going through, the problems they're facing, so that you can help solve them. And win loss is that great tool to help you do that, because it's the diagnostic after the fact of why they were coming to market, what they thought of you, why they made the decision they did. And it's information that you really can't get anywhere else. Hopefully you are doing the needs assessment and you can review your call recordings or your call notes and see the things they said of, okay, here's the problem we're trying to solve and things like that. But when you do the debrief after the fact, after the dust has settled, you get that like 30,000 foot view, and you can Monday morning quarterback it and really say, okay, they were focused on A, B, and C. Our proposal of X, Y, and Z didn't totally align with that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So, okay, we spent like 24 minutes, Zach, hopefully convincing everybody listening that win-loss is an amazing tool that they should be leveraging. Now let's spend kind of the remainder of time being like, that's great, Zach, I'm in. What do they do now? Like let's say someone's listening, they don't have one in place. Maybe they had one and it grew dormant. We see this a lot. They get all excited. They hear one of us talking about it. They go start it and then So if someone's listening and we want them to kind of look, let's just start. What should we have them do? Where should they focus? What would you recommend?
Yeah. I mean, the first step before anything else is deciding on the approach, because I'm sure a lot of your listeners are saying, oh, I've done win-loss. But you kind of have to take a step back and say, what does that really mean? Because there's a spectrum of doing win-loss, right? We talk to a lot of companies who say they do win-loss, but what they're kind of relying on are internal reason codes in their CRM, or like a collection of emails that their reps like got from buyers saying we're moving forward with someone else, or we're not moving forward at this time. And then they've got 10 emails and they're like, oh, like here's our win-loss analysis. Right. Yeah, like there's a lot of different ways you can do win-loss. You can rely on internal data, reason codes, even internal interviews. You can use more formal like research apparatuses. Some of those are more like digitally focused, like web surveys, or you can really kind of do full diagnostic forensic exercises, which is sitting down with customers after the fact, doing a full in-depth debrief. And yeah, you can do those internally, or you can rely on like a third party to be able to get the unbiased nature of the feedback. But I think like when you're thinking about how to do win-loss, the first step is just like define it for yourself. What's going to be most impactful? Because there are pros and cons to like all those different ways you technically could do win-loss, but a little biased in saying this, but also I think really important for companies to realize is that the most value you're going to get, the most bang for your buck, is doing the full debriefs. You're just going to get so much more information.
Right. The nuances are very different. And we talk about this in our classes, right? Like if you ask salespeople, why do we lose? They're going to say price. Right. Or, right. I mean, and honestly, a lot of customers will tell them price because it is like the least emotional, not your fault, it's me, not you answer that I can give. That is going to make you think you have a very different problem than a really detailed conversation is going to let you go. So, I mean, look, if it's the only thing you could do, it's something, but that to me is not win-loss, right?
Exactly.
Win-loss is going to take those conversations, either find time on your team or find someone like Anova who can do it for you to have the detailed conversations, because that's just like we talk about with discovery ahead of time, is really where you're going to find the trends.
Yeah, exactly. And so before doing anything else, you really want to think about how you can approach this and what win-loss is really going to mean for your organization. And then after that, the 3 steps I would talk about is designing your win-loss program for success, doing the research, and then sharing the results from that research. So, in terms of designing the program for success, you really want to align the areas of focus, the pieces of feedback that you're going to collect, tie those into the parts of your business that you think are most impacting why you're winning and losing, what the competitive levers that you're trying to pull are. Win-loss is really powerful because you can collect 100 different pieces of feedback, a lot of different types, and that's great. But as opposed to going a mile wide and an inch deep, if you can focus on those 4 or 5 things that you think are going to be most impactful and hone in on those areas so that you get the deepest feedback, that's going to result in data, feedback, trends that you can actually act on. So I think the biggest thing to think about is, okay, what are those, the 4 or 5 things that you really want to focus on? We've got a client kicking off right now who their hypothesis, or what they really want to know more about, is they do site visits where they invite their customers on site and kind of walk them through facilities, let them meet members of the team. They want to know how big of an impact that's having. So now we can design questions specifically around that. Did they do a site visit? Did they not do a site visit? Why not? If they did one, what were their perceptions of it? As opposed to just kind of like seeing if it comes up out of thin air, we can hone in specifically on that, as opposed to maybe questions specifically about like their pricing model or something like that. So make sure the specific questions you're asking are focused on the feedback you're most interested in, but also focus on, who you want to talk to. I think that's an important piece that sometimes gets overlooked in how to make a program a success. My default is to always starting with your largest customers. Think of the 80-20 rule. 20% of your prospects are going to amount to 80% of your revenue. But that's really just like a starting point or a guideline. Depending on your business, you might want to focus on prospects that you lost at a certain sales stage, or that you are trying to grow your market share in a certain region, or you just rolled out this new product, you want to understand perceptions of that product. Well, now it doesn't matter what size of the prospect they were. Those are pieces of your business that are important to get feedback on. So that first stage of really thinking about how do I design my program for success, it's who do I want to talk to? What do I want to talk to them about?
One of those things that when you're talking about that setup, I think one of the questions and fears that I can hear resonating in these cars that people are driving is, do I have enough people to talk to? Right? Maybe I'm B2B and we're high ticket and it's sort of enterprise and it's complex sales. And so we don't have thousands of deals. Is there a number in your mind that you're like, you know what? At least if you can do this, we're good, right?
That's a question we get all the time. It's one of the most common questions. And the thing is that I can't just whip open a statistics textbook and give you these. It's all going to be business dependent, right? It's a high volume transactional business doing thousands of deals. you do need to do more interviews than the really large dollar value, long sales cycle business that if you only have 10 deals a year, well, if you do 5 or 6 interviews, guess what? You're going to learn a lot. And those 5 or 6 interviews are going to be representative for your pipeline. In general, I like to say get to double digits at a minimum. And then from there, you kind of want to, get an even dispersion between wins and losses. But overall, I'd say the majority of like B2B companies out there are doing somewhere between, call it like 40 and 100 interviews a year. So this isn't like huge, big data. You don't need to do thousands of debriefs, but you want to get enough under your belt, provided you have a pipeline that can support it, that enables you to look at both wins and losses and have like double digits in sample size.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think double digit is a nice like baseline. Like let's say if you can get 12 a year, it's still going to give you good insights. Now to get 12 a year, you probably need, your response rate is going to be different from wins and losses. Let's be honest. Right. But you're still, you're talking like if something in your pipeline is 60, if you have 60 in your pipeline and you could probably get 12 calls, right? I mean, and it may even be a better translation than that. So it's not giant numbers that you need to get started. And now, again, percentage wise is what you're going to focus on. So if you have a ton of deals, you're going to want to have more calls because you're going to find segments within those, most likely, right? So, but I mean, I think double digits make sense, but I also just don't want people to be intimidated that they can't get enough because there's value in 10, and you're going to find immense amount of value in 10.
The awesome thing is that you'll get value out of like 2 or 3.
That's true.
Because like you can get value out of 1. It's a debrief on an individual situation, and you might be really scratching your head. What happened there? And sometimes it's one transcript that can really kind of illuminate, or it's one situation where you want to know what's going on. The other thing too, that I'll just point out is for those situations that, where you have not a lot of deals in the pipeline, don't think that you only have to talk to one person. We talked about how like buying committees are really expanding. Maybe you want to understand the perspective of your internal champion, who the ultimate decision maker was. Sometimes we are doing an interview and the interviewee will say, I really wanted to move forward with this client of yours, but there was actually this member of the team that was involved who had a prior relationship with another firm or didn't think that your client was that involved. And we'll also interview them. So think about getting multiple perspectives too, to really kind of round out your understanding of what happened.
Nice. I was going to add on another thing you brought up earlier was sort of the no decisions, right? You think, we don't have a lot of win losses. We have a lot of that either perpetually stay open. We all have those that never close, or that are no decisions. But I think you made this point earlier, and it's very, very true. There's a ton of value in talking to those because a no decision is a loss, right? It may not be a loss forever. We're not saying they'll never come back. This is not like the relationship is burned. It's like they're not coming back right now. They're not going to sign right now. Let's talk to them and figure out what we can learn.
That's a really important point, Rebecca, because it's a common kind of like reason a salesperson might not want to collect feedback. Oh, you know what? This one actually isn't closed. It's still open. I'm going to reconnect with them next quarter. That's all well and good. But the intention isn't like you can reframe the conversation with the prospect. Like, I know you're not moving ahead at this time, but as part of our commitment to collecting feedback to ensure that we're constantly meeting market needs, we'd still love to gather your impressions of your interactions with us thus far. And for that salesperson, it's actually really helpful because now you get an understanding of exactly where you stand. Maybe there are other influencers within the organization that you weren't aware of that now that respondent can fill you in on, or maybe they are able to say what they think you're great at, but maybe where they perceive you to be weaker at compared to the competition. And now when you pick those conversations back up, you can hone in on and make sure that you have crafted your story to kind of reframe those areas of improvement. So for the salespeople out there, don't think that a no decision means you can't collect feedback on it. And for the marketers who are maybe running a win-loss program or partnering with sales, to collect the data. If a salesperson says, this one's still open, don't just take that at face value. Like unpack, go a little deeper, have an open conversation. Like it may be still open, but collecting their feedback could be really helpful for you. Do you want us to still pursue this?
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about designing it, right? Knowing who we're going to talk to, what that pool need to look like. We're talking about what feedback we want to get, what levers we're looking at, kind of what hypothesize. I never know. I'm gonna look it up one day.
Yeah.
Yes, we're gonna test, and then the next step was like research, right? Which sounds easy.
Right. It sounds easy.
It sounds easy.
One of those things, though. I think the thing to keep in mind is you just want to collect the feedback in a very thoughtful, diligent way. I think some people think that they can just blast out web surveys or get someone on the phone who isn't really skilled at having an engaging, probing conversation. And that's okay because like doing those things, you'll collect some feedback. But if you really focus on asking open-ended questions, having someone who feels comfortable probing for details, whether that's because they have industry expertise and can have like a very informed conversation, or maybe it's just someone who doesn't mind feeling stupid on the line.
Right, yeah.
Say, oh, I'm not familiar with that. Can you tell me more about that? Whatever tricks you need to do to get prospects to open up more, just employ those. And I think focusing on collecting the feedback in a really thoughtful way is something that is maybe being overlooked a little bit by companies right now. They're just so focused on the end. They're just like, okay, let's send out a bunch of web surveys, get as many responses as we can. And my contention would be less quantity, but more quality is actually going to be more impactful for you. So that's really what I would focus on for people trying to do win-loss is focus on the qualitative, go deep. And then once you actually collect the feedback, share those results with a broad audience, right? Like the individual transcripts are super important. Like we were just talking about, those can be used as coaching, sitting down with the account team, the sales lead, maybe if they brought in your solutions engineers or whoever else was involved in the decision, like everyone come together, read the prospect's perceptions of what they thought of you and talk about why those perceptions exist. Those are really impactful, but then also the aggregate insights. You want to come together and talk about what those aggregate trends are saying. Don't just rely on individuals going through the data on their own.
They will not do this.
Exactly. That's the risk, I think, is like people going through and just living in their silo. And they've got their dashboard, they log into the dashboard, they see the analytics, they think they know everything now because they looked at the charts. But the reality is that there's so much learning that comes from saying, okay, the chart's saying this, that's how I interpret it. How do you interpret it? How does this other person think about it? And I've just got so many client examples of like the data isn't always what the data seems to be saying, or the finding isn't always what the data seems to be saying. And the only way to get there is through collaboration, conversation, sharing your perspectives. So as it relates to that last piece of a win-loss program is what do I actually do with the findings? The biggest thing I would recommend is sharing it with others and focusing on collaboration and internal alignment.
I always think of it as like an iceberg, right? So I want to share the analysis and data, and I want to share some quotes, make it feel real. I want to give them access to more and more data, and so they can dive down. As I want to make it really clear that I'm not hiding anything, right? I'm not just giving you my number, but I also understand they will not. Like the number of people who will dive deep on one is that in my career has been a very small percentage.
Yeah.
Right. I still want to give them that access because, if it's my particular account, I might need the full report. Right. And there's reasons for that. But it's important to be like, here's the findings, right? Which is the interpretation. Here's the data. Here's the source material. You can go all the way down, right? It's all available to you, but let's focus here on what that means next. So the other thing, and maybe it's just me, but one other pushback I've had, we talk about it, when you talk about the research section, it is very much a qualitative conversation, right? These are open-ended questions, high value, not like, this is not a survey call, right? You're not saying, oh, it's okay, we did a call. That's not a survey call. But then when you're living the results, right? Even if you have, say you do 40 calls, which is a lot of calls, right? But you have hundreds of clients, you're still going to get the, you know what, this is wonderful qualitative, but this isn't quantitative. It doesn't hold up in court, right? There's still going to be people who maybe don't agree with the finding. And so use that as a way to dismiss it. How do you guys deal with that?
It's funny, perception is it's one of those things where it can be like your biggest blind spot sometimes. And I think the important thing to remember, think about like the meme a couple of years ago. It was like, is the dress blue or is it yellow?
Yes.
And everyone had their own opinion. And if you read through like the comments on the blog post or whatever, things were getting really fierce, right?
Right. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Just, you can ruin plenty of cookouts that way.
But everyone has their different perceptions, right? And it's not that someone's right or someone's wrong, even though if you read the comment section, you might think that. But it's, okay, why does this feedback even exist in the first place, right? I'll give you actually a great like personal example. I received like Anova, we do win-loss on ourselves. And one time we were talking with this organization, they didn't move ahead with us. We did a debrief after. And the feedback was that we weren't doing, they didn't feel like I personally was as proactive as they were looking for. And they didn't think that Anova was a thought leader in the space. And my first reaction was, how does she think this? I've got like the email thread, me emailing her every week. I even sent her an invite to a webinar. How does she not think that we're thought leaders? She's wrong. And, sometimes the prospect is wrong, but that's not the important piece because you're never going to get to like a greater positive outcome if you just say, yes, they're wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. I had to take a step back and say, well, why does she not think that I was proactive? Why does she not think that we're a thought leader? Oh, maybe my emails I was sending, it was like the last thing I was trying to do at the end of the week. And she wasn't paying attention to her inbox at 4:00 on a Friday afternoon. Don't really blame her there. Maybe like it's not just emails. Maybe she was someone who preferred phone check-ins or LinkedIn messages. And so there are a lot of different things that like if I took a step back and said, okay, how can I be accountable here? I can actually try to be better at the next time. Because what's happened is in the past, it's not about being right or wrong. It's how do I make sure that this doesn't happen again? And that's one of the biggest things that I like try to coach my clients on is, the feedback is going to sting. Sometimes it's going to be right. Sometimes it's going to be wrong. But at the end of the day, you're only going to win the next deal if you act on it. So how can we act on it?
I'm sorry that happened to you. But also I think it's a very...
You can tell I'm still
right. But I also think it's really good because honestly, like that's how all of the salespeople feel when we do these reports, right? Even no matter, like, again, I've never been in a company who used these punitively. It's only been helpful and peace, but it doesn't matter as the salesperson, right? It hurts. Yeah. And being able to see that, like same, they always come back and be like, well, we were going to go with you, but you guys don't have X, Y, or Z. And we're like, yes, we do. And the salesperson is like, we do. And I talked about it. And we're like, you know what I mean? Like you're so passionate about it. And I think it's just a really good illustration of that is human nature. You're going to feel that way. And you're right. Like that's crazy. But how could we make sure the next person talking to someone else really felt it? Right. And it is the harder part of a win-loss program in terms of sharing out and letting people hear past the defense.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's the hard part about sharing with others is you don't want your dirty laundry kind of shared, but
now we all know Zach is lazy and then
yeah, but it's why you do need to share. It's because everyone has their idea about why feedback exists.
Yeah.
And the only way to really understand it is by bringing together all these different perspectives. And so, don't look through things through like your own siloed lens. Like if I got that feedback and I just internalized it, it was actually sharing it with, my manager and having them coach me about, okay, but what about these other things that you could have done? that kind of got me to step out of just being in the mud of thinking that the prospect's wrong.
Right.
So
Yeah.
sometimes it's really hard to read the label from the inside of the bottle. You need that external perspective of what's going on. So don't be afraid to share.
No, and it's easy. We all become experts in our own products. So things we know are so obvious to us, right? We forget to tell them, right? You think about this all the time in marketing, where we've written about a topic a million times. Everyone's got to know it now. Well, like someone's just dropping into the bucket right now. They've never heard it. Or you just make assumptions. So it is very important to get those outside eyes. And in this case, we're talking about outside eyes of people who matter to your business, right? Well, you don't need everyone to win, but this is the profile of people who you guys need to be resonating with in what you build and how you sell it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
All right, Zach, we talked about lots of different things. We have beat the drum that you all need to be doing win-loss. It changes businesses. It has measurable revenue impact. It matters. So we talked about lots of different things. If you were going to have listeners do 2 things differently tomorrow, based on what we talked about today, what would that be?
Well, I think I would say one is think about what win-loss really means to your organization. We talked a lot about awesome trends, good insights. But if you're relying on your internal CRM reason codes, you may think you have trends, but they're probably misleading you. So win-loss really means doing these in-depth qualitative interviews and figure out and think about the best way to collect that information for your organization. And then the second one is what we were just talking about. It's share. It's don't think of yourself as a lone wolf collecting the feedback. The power is going to come from the community that you're a part of and your team that you can share the results with and talk about how to move forward together. So think about what win-loss really means for your organization, how to do it well, and 2 is bring people together, share the results.
Excellent. All right. And if people wanted to learn more about win-loss from you guys or get Zach's thoughts on how often you should follow up with a prospect that we know he's not very proactive. No, I'm just going to keep teasing you about that every time we talk now. So you should never have told me that.
I'll never live it down.
This is and like every salesperson is like, see, and this is why I don't want to. I'm just kidding. All right. But if people to find out more, where should I send them?
Yeah. A couple things. You can go to AnovaConsulting.com. We publish a lot of trends about what we're seeing in the industry. If you're interested, you can reach out to us there. You can feel free to reach out to me directly. My email is Zach, Z-A-C-H, at AnovaConsulting.com, or search for me on LinkedIn. Trying to be a little more proactive there and share some of the thoughts and insights that I'm seeing with my clients. So give me a follow and looking forward to connect with anyone who's interested in learning more.
Excellent. Thank you, Zach. It was a pleasure having you on today. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks, Rebecca.
All right. That does it for today's episode. Thank you everyone for listening. And don't forget to join us next week when we tackle another great topic designed to help you elevate your product, your company, and your career.